Hello, and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I am John, and today we're going to be covering some Star Wars Legion painting. Uh, no, you did not lose 2 days out of your life. I have actually flip-flopped with Will this week, so he can take care of some real-life issues. So I will be covering the second half of the stream that I started last Friday, which is painting the interior detail of the LAAT LE, and also working with clear plastic parts like cockpits, canopies, flight stands, etc. So I spent a little bit of time between last Friday and today getting some more work done on the miniature itself. So why don't we switch over to that, and we can go ahead and get started and try to get this thing wrapped up in the next hour. All right. Okay, just checking to make sure that we're getting sound everywhere. Thing is doing okay. Since we've kind of moved the setup, so can I get a confirmation in the chat that you guys can hear me all right? So this is showing the LAAT as I have done some extra work on it. So I spent a lot of time airbrushing it last week. Went through and we layered up all the different colors. I showed you how this whole thing kind of breaks apart into different components. So this side, I've applied a oil wash over top of all of the detail, which helps make all the panel lines and everything kind of pop, so you can see it a little bit better. Over here on this other side shows you what it looks like without that oil wash. So you can kind of see this top section here has been washed, but all of this section down here has not been. So that's going to be what I'm going to cover next today. I've gone through and I've painted all of the interior detail on the inside as well. So I'll crack this thing open. We can take a look at it. And then I've also masked off all of the clear window bits on this clear cockpit section that goes here in the front. And I attached it and assembled everything. And I think it's an important thing to remember, like when you are painting something in sub-assemblies, you have a lot of different parts. Eventually, all of those components are going to go together. And it's important that they all blend in together very well. So after you have gone through and painted, say, the left half, the right half, the interior detail, all this other stuff, I think it is a good idea to put it all back together again and then just do some quick airbrushing over some spots, or some brush painting if you're deciding not to utilize an airbrush, to get some transitions real smooth. So a good example of that was here at the top of the LAAT, where this cockpit area, since I airbrushed this separately from the actual hull itself, the colors did not match. So I attached all this stuff back, put it back in there, put over a light spray of the lighter green over top to get it to blend in a little bit better, and now it blends a lot better than it did previously. So the other things that I did finish is I painted up the crew that are going to go in the back. So we've got, I had some extra miniatures from my Imperial Special Forces, so an extra Del Miko miniature and an extra unit leader. So I have painted these up in my Imperial Special Forces scheme, again, kind of attaching them to a separate piece with some foam tape. Yeah, Creeping Foliage Games. I did, in fact, mask the glass on the ship. I just took some painter's tape, some blue painter's tape, and applied it over top, and then kind of scored it down and pushed it down up against the surface, and then used an X-Acto knife to trim it away from the raised areas. Let me show you that. So all these raised areas here, you have like this kind of cage area that goes around the entire thing. So I tape it down, and then I would use an X-Acto blade and cut along the edge there to trim up the tape. And that reveals all of the framework around the outside, so I can spray that without worrying about it. And then finally, there is this little end cap that will go on the front right here and connect to finish out the front canopy section. And again, that was also airbrushed in the same kind of colors. Cool. So yep. So I did finish the crew. So those are pretty much good to go. I think the only thing that I have left are some Inferno squadron symbols to go on their helmets, which I will add at a later date. So I probably won't be gluing this completely together at this point because I have some more details to do. But I'll cover the whole thing so to give you all some insight on the process. And then I also painted up the two pilots. So that's what they look like. So I've got two different variants here, one with the control stick in one hand. That one's going to be the one that's going to be down in the front. and this fellow will be back in the back. So they're just painted in, again, in the same kind of scheme. I like that red racing stripe down the side, green fatigues, black uniforms, and this kind of shows the back of the chairs and everything else. So let's crack open this thing, and we can kind of talk about the interiors, and I can show off some of the insides and things, and then we can actually get to painting some stuff. So as I showed before last week, these things come off separately. I think it's a good idea to leave these separate because it's hard to get in there and paint them otherwise. So you can leave those a little bit separate up on the top. These ones, however, do sandwich in between the top and the bottom half of this section on the hull. So you have to kind of dodge around these and paint these by hand. So and leave them attached to the miniature unless you wanted to do some modifications in how it is all set up. But that's up to you. So this top section pops off. This whole section comes off here like this. You kind of set that off to the side, and then this thing is split into two halves. And you can kind of see the difference in between. This is when I have applied the oil wash over top to kind of define some of those panels, and this is just the bare airbrushing between the two. So hopefully the camera can kind of pick up the difference between the two of those. This further splits into two halves. So you have to take off this little end cap here, this little antenna. And then this can split into two halves here. So this is the half that I'm going to be painting today. And this is the half that I'd already finished. And then inside here, you've got this crew compartment, which is where I will glue the crew miniatures. And this, I decided to, so I could get in there and actually access it easy, I left this into two separate halves as well by gluing the front plate here that has the door and all those other details there. And then this is the rear interior section. So this was airbrushed up with the lighter gray along the sides, painted all this a darker gray, did a light dry brush in the center section of it with a lighter kind of tan color. And then I picked out a lot of these little cool details in here, like this big giant red button and this little control panel and these little boxes and things. So just little stuff that, so when you angle it down there and you peer inside, you can see some of that cool detail. And leaving all these parts separate like this has allowed us to get in there and paint all this cool little detail. This will be glued together at one point, certainly so I can play some games with it. But for now, just so I can still get in here and finish up all these other little parts, the way that Bexley engineered this thing, you can pull it apart pretty easily, as I have kind of shown here. So let's go ahead and get into the washing stage, because it's important that that dries before we kind of proceed with it. So I'm going to take, let me see if I have one more thing to mount this thing to. So we're going to focus on this half right here. And to hold on to it, I like to mount these kind of sub-assemblies to something else that I can easily hold on to. So in this case, I've got a piece of plastic card with some foam tape on it. So let me grab that one sec. Shown here, just like this. A little bit of glare there. Cool, so you can just take this entire thing and just stick it onto the side, just press it kind of lightly, and then when you need to peel it off, you can just bend this plastic card and it'll pop right off. So this entire section up here is going to be obscured, so I'm not too concerned about that. But all of the rest of this stuff is all going to be exposed, so I definitely want to show off all that stuff pretty well. Okay, so for this, I have taken some oil paints, and this is just burnt umber oil paint here, and I have mixed it together with some white spirit, or just mineral spirits, to create a wash here. And I like to mix up a big batch of this stuff and use it for a number of different purposes, but this is how I've gone about painting all of my Imperial vehicles thus far. So one other important note is that you need to make sure that you apply a varnish over top of your airbrush work over top before you start to apply this oil wash. And in my experience, when I have not done that, when I go through to actually wipe away all of the oil wash from the raised areas, it will result in a sometimes me wiping away and actually pulling some of that airbrush paint off. So I like to put a layer of a varnish over top. I just use just a dull coat, just a spray matte varnish over top, and that will help protect all of my airbrush work that I've already done previous. So when it comes to this oil wash process, let me see if I can just adjust this camera just slightly. Second. A little bit of the exposure there. Okay, that looks a little better. Okay. So when it comes to this wash, it's not an affair where you're just going to take an oil wash and you're just going to slather it over top of everything. What we want to do is we want to take some of this wash and we just want to kind of touch it into any of these cracks and crevices, any of these areas where we want these panels to be defined. And you'll notice that just the capillary action of the wash will kind of trace around those areas pretty well. Now this area in particular, I'm going to go ahead and flood most of this because I want this to be pretty dark in and throughout here where this kind of vent section is. So again, I've just kind of thinned down some burnt umber oil paint and thinned it down with some mineral spirits, and now I'm just kind of applying it into all of these recessed areas to get some better definition. And then we'll let this dry, and then what's nice about using the oil paints is that we can take a rag or a Q-tip or anything like that with a little bit of the mineral spirits on it, and we can wipe away all these raised areas. So all these messy spots right here that don't look very great right now, we can tidy all that stuff up to just leave a nice little line of wash around any of these panels and any of these details that we want. So we'll kind of continue up to here. And we're just going to kind of touch into these little channels and just kind of let it chase through there. Hopefully the camera can kind of pick that up as I proceed through here. And we'll have a little bit of a shade here around this rim, around this section. And this is nice keeping this stuff separate because you don't have to worry about, oops, I went a little bit outside the lines and now I need to touch up something else. Doing all this stuff separately will make sure that your colors don't get contaminated with some of the wash where you don't want it. I'll just kind of apply it, making sure that I have really good coverage in the cracks. That's what I really, really want to focus on. But I don't necessarily want to just slather it all over the entire miniature because it's just going to create more cleanup that I have to do later. And I am trying to get through this in an efficient way. We'll just kind of dot that down. You can maybe see this. This is a good panel example here. You can just kind of see it just chase around all this stuff by just taking the wash and just kind of touching it to the edge where these panel lines are. Get down here underneath. Shade all this area in here too. Or on this side. And if oil paints are something that are kind of scary to you and you don't necessarily feel comfortable at this point utilizing them, you can certainly replicate this with standard shading. But the reason that we've chosen oil paints is just because it's faster than applying all this airbrushing and then applying a shade over top of it and then going back in and touching up the raised areas again. This just allows you to just remove all this stuff in a fast and efficient way. Just requires you to experiment a little bit with some new techniques and some new materials. And I think that there's always new things to learn when it comes to miniature painting. Get down here and get all these sections in here. Let's turn it around here. And this extra little handle is certainly very useful just to make sure that you don't get your hands in it, because this oil paint will take a little while to dry. It's really easy for you to just accidentally put your thumb right into it. So having something extra to kind of hold on to the miniature is always welcome when you're doing messy stuff like this. Okay, and some more shades down in here. Now the bottom of this vehicle would probably see a little bit more more contact with the ground. It might be a little bit dirtier on the bottom, so I might go just a little bit heavier down here on all these details. But you just really want to make sure to get that wash laying flat in all of the cracks and the crevices. All these cool little vent bits. And be sure that you keep an eye like underneath any of these parts that are kind of obscured by other parts, like where this kind of like landing boom goes over top of this. You're still going to have like some panels underneath, so you have to tip it down and get in there and hit it from all the angles. I've enjoyed this process quite a bit, so I'll probably be coming back to do the AA5 speeder truck at a later date. I'm definitely looking forward to painting that one. That one will be fun too because I can do a lot of really heavy weathering on it and it won't look too crazy. I mean, I've already done some pretty heavy weathering on some of my Imperial stuff, but that speeder truck I think looks awesome when it's nice and beat up. It just looks like it's a repurposed utilitarian vehicle, I suppose. All right, so just zipping around here. It takes a little bit of time to do this, but while this one is or this side is drying, we can shift gears and move over to another section of the miniature. Probably flip it over and do the interior cockpit section, which I've used the same shade for that. Again, this kind of burnt umber, and it will result in your interior of your crew compartment looking kind of like this. So that was hit up with the lightest gray that I had, pale blue gray, I think, by Vallejo, and then applied this shade over top of it, this oil wash, and then kind of wiped away the recesses. But let's get all this top area up here done first. Takes a little bit of time to go through and do it, but it's still saving you time in the long run, I promise you. And then all these cool little strut bits here, don't forget those either. Make sure to get down in there and get all those too. And then there's this kind of recessed panel here that I'm just going to put a decent amount of shade in where these struts meet with the actual hull. So let's put a little shade around this thing to make that pop. And when it comes to these oil paints, after you've kind of applied your initial washes over top, and you go back through and you tidy them up, which I will show you here shortly, you can paint over top of them again with acrylic paints, but I do kind of recommend that you might want to apply another varnish coat over top of it. So once you get all of your washes resting just how you want them, and then you decide, oh, I want to paint this additional detail or some extra thing, you can paint over top of this stuff, but because oil and water don't mix, obviously, you want to be a little careful, and I think that like another layer of a spray varnish over top will help ensure that you're not going to have any sort of weird interactions in your water-based acrylics and your oil-based wash that's underneath it. These things, I think this is a good example right here. Like this vent I'm toying with, painting a darker color up here at the front of the vehicle. And I haven't decided on that yet. So if I do decide that I want to go through and I want to pick out a couple panels and do some extra little accent colors and things like that, I can definitely do that. Just I will make sure to apply another layer of varnish over top of the oil wash. Make sure everything is all good. So basic rule of thumb, like in between layers of acrylic paints and oil washes, put a layer of varnish down. I think it's a good idea. Dab a little bit here and there. And you can see this does not look particularly great right now, but it will look better, I promise. Get some here around these steps. These would get a lot of mud and gunk and stuff on them, so we'll pick those out pretty well. And then the channels down here, don't forget these either. These are cool little details that you want to make sure to get stuff in there. And if you can, try to set this thing up to dry so it's flat, and just like with any sort of wash or shade. If you put it on there a little bit too thick, it will start to pull down. Gravity does its job, and it will start to pull things in weird directions. So try to lay it flat if you can while you're letting this all dry. But because I'm going to be flipping this over and painting the other side, I won't be able to do that very easily. But just general good advice. Yeah, I'm sorry, Coop J. I don't really have any sort of information about international release dates. We don't have a whole lot of control over when the rest of the world releases our products. I know that they're working on it. Everybody's trying to get through all these logistics problems right now as we try to get back to normal. So thanks for being patient. Hopefully they'll get over to you relatively soon. I played my first game with Callus the other day, and he was fun. The contingencies are very useful. It's nice to have backup plans for sure. Okay, maybe just a little bit more shade down in here. Cover that little bit. Okay, so all of these recess spots are painted to my liking now. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry a little bit, but I am going to flip this thing over and go ahead and paint the other side of it. Just pop this guy off. Foam tape is being a little stubborn. All right. And same story over here. Essentially just using this wash to dot into all these panels. You can just see it just kind of zip right through there. You can just tap it into these little buttons, these little channels, and it'll just zip right around and rest where you want it to. And for all this interior stuff, I just airbrushed it with that lighter gray, and then I did go through and I picked out little details like the red on the control panels and a few other boxes and things. It'll just save me a little bit of time if I just paint in all those base coats now, as opposed to just putting another layer of varnish down and then picking out those details and stuff. Go ahead and shade all this stuff. We're doing on time. 20 minutes in, wash is getting down. I think we're doing all right. So does anybody have any general questions about working with clear parts or anything in particular that you want to post in the chat? Maybe I can lend some insight, something that isn't necessarily covered in the stuff that we've talked about thus far. I haven't talked about the base yet, but I will break that out. I haven't actually gone to creating a scenic base for it yet, but I'm going to start working on that tonight, I think. Down in here. And hopefully by the time that we've applied all this shade, this will be, the flip side will be dry enough that we can go in and start working on tidying up all the shades and making it look a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer. Do that spot that I missed. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Yeah, Russ, you could totally use liquid mask on the windshield. I assume that's what you're talking about. Yeah, there's a Frisket. It's a watercolor material. It's kind of like a gummy stuff that you can paint over top, and then it dries kind of like rubber cement, and then you can just actually remove it and pull it off, and it won't stick to the underlying surface. Usually it doesn't. There's also a product made by Vallejo that's a chipping medium that works in a very similar way. It's kind of a liquid mask that you can use for some cool chipping effects. If I find that I have a little bit extra time, maybe I'll do that I'll go into like a racing stripe on the side. There are two so you can see here there are two sections. So there's a control panel here and a control panel there. And like I said, now's a good time I can kind of show you how these pilots go in here. And each of these pilots, on the bottom of their chair, they have like a small little peg right there, and that peg rests right inside of there. So you have one pilot that goes up on the top, and then another pilot that goes down here below. Right here. Just like that. Make sure I don't get any oil wash on these guys. Okay, we've gone through and we've gotten all of the wash in the places that we really want it to be. Again, very messy, but we will tidy that up. So let's cover a little bit on that process and how I go about cleaning up these washes. So you can use a rag dipped in some mineral spirits if you want to. I find that that's usually pretty abrasive and will oftentimes result in you losing a little bit of the paint that's underneath. So what I have kind of been shifting over to doing is I just fill up like the cap to my white spirit, and then I use this in conjunction with a brush and a shop towel. Grab one of those. Just a shop towel like this, and I like to use these because they don't have a lot of extra fibers on them. You could use Q-tips or whatever you wanted to. And then I just dip my brush in a little bit of the spirit. I get a little bit damp, and then I just go through here, and I just kind of feather away that edge on that raised spot that I don't want that paint to be at. And then I just have my my shop towel here, and I can just kind of wipe that away. You just go through, you just kind of carefully feather out that edge. Let me move this so I can get a better angle on it. One moment while I mess with my camera a little bit more. Okay. All right. So back to this. On this panel right up here, it's a little bit too much. You don't really want to like put it down as like a full wash. Again, like the more of this white spirit that you use, the greater the chance that it's going to start to eat away at the acrylic paint that's underneath it. Now you got a nice clean panel there with a dark line around it. And you can go back and forth with this as much as you really want to. You can apply extra layers over top, go in with multiple colors. I'm just going for a kind of an expedited, like single wash approach. This is how I just go through and I paint tabletop quality miniatures for my armies. If I really wanted to spend some extra time, I certainly could, but this is the general approach. Just trying to show different techniques for you all to pick and choose when it comes to painting your own forces. We'll just tidy up this underside here. Brush. Apologies if the angle is a little bit off here. It's kind of hard to get it so you can see it. It's kind of an irregular shaped thing. Ooey Chewy, thanks for joining us. Glad you got a bit of a break from work. This is just that for me. It's work, but it's also just a bit of a break. Certainly enjoy it. I love doing these live streams. They're a lot of fun. Okay. Wipe away that raised area. You can also just use this if you wanted to just feather out some of the wash and the shade that you have. If you have like an area that you want to have like a nice transition, you can certainly just kind of go back and forth and just kind of feather the whole thing out. But I find that this approach, by minimizing the amount of thinner that I actually have active at a time by using a brush, It keeps the odors down. It keeps the chance of me actually eating through the paint a little bit less. Just keeps it more controlled, and it does take a little bit longer than just, say, throwing a wash over top of this entire thing and then just wiping it down with a rag. But I like it. I like this approach. Okay, so we've got some messy stains up here on the top of the door. Yeah, I think if I can find time, I certainly would like to do a little bit of streaking for the engine exhausts. I assume that like these kind of air intakes here at the front is probably where some of that's gonna collect. There's not really like a jet exhaust in the back of it. It's got that kind of tie hover tech. So I don't know if it would necessarily produce the same sort of jet exhaust marks that you would see on a real world jet fighter, but you kind of do what you want. But yeah, if I find a little bit of time, I'll go about that. And I think you can do those kind of those effects with either with an airbrush, or you could feather in paint and just paint them in. It's kind of up to you how you want to approach it. And you'll just continue this process around the whole miniature, erasing it from the raised areas and just reapplying it to any spots that you might have wiped away. I think in general, it's a good idea, like when you're, say, doing a raised panel like this. So instead of like wiping, like start in the middle of the panel and wipe away towards the edges, because that way it'll hopefully skip the drop down where the shade is actually resting. And it'll usually produce a little bit better results. Okay. Tidy up some of these spots. We've got about a half an hour left. I think this will be enough time for us to get through and apply these oil washes and then glue those crew in there so we can get an idea of how this whole thing will look when it comes together. And then we get to pull that tape off the front of the canopy. That's going to be the big reveal. And hopefully no paint snuck in underneath. But if it did, I got a technique for tidying that up too. Generally, you can just use a kind of a soft edged plastic scraper. Like, don't necessarily use like a knife or something like that, but something like a plastic knife, or something a little bit softer, but you can use that and scrape away at any sort of paint that is dried on the clear plastic, and it'll reduce your chances of actually scratching the clear plastic. Okay. There too. Got a little bit more back here towards the back. I can't wait to get this thing painted because I am so excited to get it on the table. I'm thinking the build that I'm going to go for it, I'm going to put Governor Price in it because I like the Field Commander rules and I like the options that it frees up. And the fact that you can just get an extra token at the cost of a suppression, but that's still a useful thing for 10 points, I think. And then I'll go for the range 4 missiles. I think they're the 8-point ones. I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head. And then the onboard comms channel, which will be really cool, because then if you have a unit transported inside, which I'm debating between snowtroopers because they can jump out and shoot a little bit more effectively, or in Imperial Special Forces, because they would also just thematically be awesome in the back of this thing, and that's actually the miniatures that I'm putting in the back. So more likely than not, I'll put some Imperial Special Forces in there, but I don't know. It's just having that onboard comms channel allows you to, when you issue an order to the LAAT, also the unit that's inside of it gets an order too, which is super useful. Just to make sure that you coordinate, so you can, okay, I want to move my LAAT up and then I want to jump the guys out, or I need to jump these guys out first and grab an objective and then I want to move the LAAT. It's nice to have that control over the order of your activations. sure as many Legion players are well familiar. Yeah, Governor Price. I am a fan. Most definitely a fan. But there's some more. There are other ways you can certainly build out this thing too. So it's I'll just have to experiment. You know, like maybe I want to go like real heavy with ordnance and use Valen Rudor in there. I don't know. We'll be posting some more pilots here soon for you guys to peruse. There's some really cool ones coming up for the AA5 for sure. Right. So yeah, this process just continues. So just go through. I do suggest, like, you know, if you're sitting down and painting using oil washes, to try to divide up your work into manageable chunks. I think like exposure to the mineral spirits and the smell of it can certainly give you a headache over time. I think if you do it in, you know, 1 hour, 1 hour, 2 hour doses, something like that, it'll be a little bit better for you in general. And it's also important that you just kind of let some of these stages dry in between. Like if you're going to apply a varnish, like let it dry completely before you start to put oils over top of it, because if it's not completely dry, sometimes it interacts really weird and it will cause some of your paint to peel or do some weird stuff. So just be patient with it. We're saving time and we're relaxing with our extra time that we have. Continue around here, hit up these spots. And this armored assault. Yeah, I'm really excited for the AA5 too. I don't even play Rebels, and I'm excited to see that thing just running around. I think I'm mostly excited about, you know, just the closed transport rules and just like added dimensions to the game that just, oh, now all of a sudden I can get Darth Vader across the table, you know, in new ways without him, like, say, infiltrating or something like that. And you can just, you know, you can force your opponent to deal with certain pieces that normally they had the luxury of shooting at for 3 or 4 turns. And now they just have to make a decision on how they're going to deal with this Jedi Master or Sith Master right in their face. Or any powerful character, really. I mean, Iden Versio jumping out up close is also pretty good. I also really like Price for the just the mobility of a commander. You know, just having a field commander that can just zip all over the board like that is pretty cool, and is also obviously very durable because Price is behind these armored walls, or Shriv Surgav in the case of the A5. You know, whichever the equivalent is. It's cool just being able to like move them around and, yeah, and just issue orders from a tank. I just think that's a cool thematic thing. You know, like it's a tank commanders are just like a neat concept. Oh, Reckless Pilot is my favorite art in all of Legion. I was involved in helping craft that art brief. I'm a fan of the Snivians. And he just looks so happy, so completely full of joy, careening his vehicle into the enemy. There's something you got to appreciate about someone loving their work. All right, gonna wipe off these spots. Looking pretty tidy. All right, so there's just a couple little areas here and there that I see where I just want to clean it up just a little bit more. Keep all this in frame here so you guys can see it. And then after gone through, washed everything, I think it's a good idea once you have actually glued everything all together to go back in with the washes too and just smooth out any sort of areas that just makes it all look like it's one big hull and not two separate halves. That'll just be a stage, I think, towards the very end of this whole thing where I've gotten all the interior detail done. I just want to be able to, make some final adjustments to the raised areas and stuff once it's all glued together. And we've gone through all these stages and steps to make sure that we, can see the interior crew, all this cool detail that was added with the miniature, and also just keep that clear windshield. And you certainly don't have to go about this. I mean, in stark contrast, Will is glued all the doors shut and is just painting the clear cockpit in a different color, and it's going to look great too. So it's I think it's kind of whichever direction you want to go with it. If you want to have this interior detail as an option, this is how I would go about it. There's other ways to do it, but this way is mine. All right, that looks pretty good. I see maybe just some of these other little, just smoothing out some of these little spots here and just tidying those up. I love the workability of these oil washes. I think it's just a real nice thing if you're looking to just tweak things just a little bit. Add just a little bit of darkness, a little bit of contrast here and there. All right, that looks pretty good. So let's see one little spot I did miss right here. Let's hit this part. So let's pop this over and I'll show you the interior section. This should be dry enough for us to paint on the inside. Same story here, different color, but you get to see how the wash looks over top of two different colors, and it's produces some different results. If you wanted something to look a little bit more clean on the interior, you could certainly use like a lamp black or even a Payne's gray or something like that. As far as the oil paints go, don't have to use this brown. My Imperial Forces are a little beat up. I'm kind of going for that, post Endor remnants, kind of Imperial remnants vibe. So I don't mind a little bit of weathering and dirt and wear and tear, I suppose. Yeah, you could definitely put LEDs in here. I think that you could line them up. You've got a little bit of a space. I mean, if you're looking for like planning, you've got a little space here at the front that you could probably drop a battery pack. You could run a wire up along the top. You could put little lights on the inside of the roof section in there, perhaps. Yeah, you could totally do that. LEDs is something that I don't mess around with too much. I usually, I figure like all that time spent just to make something light up, I could have painted another miniature, but I think they certainly look cool, and I always appreciate the engineering that goes into it. I think that is a really cool thing, especially when people do lightsabers and stuff like that. It's very neat. Okay. Try to wipe some of this stuff off. And the important thing here is that you just understand the general approach and technique. It's I think that you can, again, spend lots of time like going back and tidying up these washes and making them just the perfect blends that you really want them to be. But that is up to you and how you want to approach it. What we're here to do is just give you some ideas and let you run wild with them. Speaking of cool ideas, I've been keeping up with all the my Star Wars Legion stuff. So as a reminder, today is your last day to enter your miniatures for the commander rank. We'll be gathering up all those things and talking about them on a future stream. We're going to make some staff picks and recognize some of the awesome work that comes from the community. I will say that I have seen some amazing stuff in there. Very, very impressive work. Of all sorts of different stuff, not just new releases, not just clones, but or Empire or anything else like that. It's just a little bit of something from everything, from every faction. That's cool. Hurricane Girl, I'll have to check out your what you do with this. I'm excited to see what other people do with it. There's a lot of potential here for taking things a little bit further. You know, you can do cool lighting effects on this cockpit interior if you wanted to have like it all light up like it's red with some cool lighting effects. Magnetization. You can have additional crew popping out. You can have soldiers rappelling off the side of it. Oh yeah, there's lots of cool ideas. I just think that's why I like this release so much, is that it just is this cool, evocative ship. It's like this awesome vehicle that is like kind of custom created for a specific task, which is usually like the apprehension of criminals or prized priority targets, you know. So it's my current lists are like the skirmish list that I'm working on right now is it's Callus, a LAAT, Shore Troopers, a Mortar, Imperial Special Forces unit as like kind of like an acquisition team. Like they're sent out to like to capture somebody or to secure an asset or something like that. That's just like it's a fun little theme, you know, for like a little small force. Little 500-point games. Buddies and I are have been, since quarantine started, have all been chipping away at new armies, and that is the one that I'm working on right now. I mean, I have the advantage because I get to do it at work. Although some of them are already all done. They're faster than I am. They've been steady painting. Yeah, and then I think we'll start up like a little league or something. You know, we're all just anxious to get back to playing games face to face. I'm sure as many of you all are as well. Oh, I didn't really paint it. You're not going to see it very well. I mean, maybe I'll go back in. Actually, when I put everything together, you can't really see these control panels. But yeah, you could definitely paint little tiny radars and stuff in there. I might do that when I go back in to add some additional details. Nobody else will be able to see it, but I'll know it's there, and that's cool. All right. So with this too, you can also just use your brush to kind of like pull the shade into like the cracks and the crevices if you're not getting really good coverage in some spots. Be afraid to do that. Okay, well, we've got about 10 minutes left. So rather than me just continue to wipe away shade for the remainder, why don't we shift gears and let's glue this crew down and see and pull the tape off the front canopy and stuff and just get a look at how all this thing is coming together. So the first thing I'll have to do is I'll have to attach the crew members here. So you have a couple different options. You could you know, scrape away at this to reveal exposed plastic and use plastic glue. But I'm just going to go the simpler route, and I'm just going to use a little tiny dab of super glue to affix the miniatures to the base. So this is our interior. And these are our crew. These two here. So the sniper, I think, looks best pointed out this window, so you can see them. And then the other character I like facing the other way. So I think they're probably going to wind up going something like sniper here, and then this character on this side. And this is kind of how I mocked it up originally. I like their hand being like on that button over there on the side. Cool, so that is what we're looking at. So let's go ahead and attach the sniper first. I've just got a little bit of super glue. I'm just going to put a little tiny dot bottom of their feet. The risk you often run with super glue is that it can craze and frost up. We've mentioned that before in the past. All right, and I want them to be kind of close to the front, but in the middle of the window. So I think right there seems good. Cool. The first one's in there. And rather than glue this entire thing and glue it all together, I can still leave these guys here, and then I can just go in and paint any additional details. Kind of as I mentioned before, I want to put some Inferno Squad markings on their helmets, so I will do that later. If you were really ambitious, you could certainly sink some magnets into the floor here and make these things removable. I just think they'd be a little tough to pull out in and out. All right, and let's put them here and on that button. All right, so there is our crew section. Put the roof on here. Click that over top. Rests in there pretty well. And then when it comes to aligning the interior crew compartment with the vehicle, there are these little notches here on the top, and then these little notches here on the top of the crew section as well. So you can just slot those guys right in there. That. Oops. One sec, I gotta line my thing in here. That all snugged up. Okay, now we can push that in there. Okay. And second half. Clips together quite nicely. Hopefully you can see them in the back there. The light here is not really the best as far as like getting in there to be able to see it. Maybe you can see a little bit better like that. We've got this guy on this side, kind of peering out that window. And the sniper on the other side. Looks super cool. Great idea, Gavin. Totally stole it from you. All right. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? We forgot to do the pilots. So let's do them. Jumped ahead a little bit too fast. So I have glued in the handle for this side. So that means I'm going to glue in my pilots onto this half. Here we go. Okay, so the one that I have that does not have his hand on the control bar there is this one. So I'll slot him up here there. I'm just going to put a little dab of super glue here. And I'm going to put a really, really small one there because I might want to pull these guys out here to paint some more stuff. So this is mostly just to kind of tack them in place. Okay. And then the second one has a little bit of super glue right down here. A dab will do ya. Thanks for the compliments on the color scheme, y'all. I like how it's turning out too. Oops, I'm in there straight. All right, now we should be able to sandwich them in there. Many little tabs and pegs to align. All right, and there is the crew compartment with the crew in there. Looks awesome. I might even just leave that front cockpit section loose so you can see all these cool guys inside. We'll see how well you can see them through the glass. All right, I'm just going to kind of nudge those a little bit just to get them to straighten up and go in the right spots. Oh, this one down here on the bottom, the handle that they have in their hand has a little post on the peg that plugs into this wall section over there on the side. Okay, cool. Now this section goes up on the top. Oh, it's coming together. And then this section will go here. Right there on the front. But let's remove this tape. Let's see how well of a masking job I did. Again, I've chosen to use painter's tape here because it has a low tack. It's really easy to remove and it won't leave very much residual sticky stuff behind. Well, it's looking pretty good. Look to there. And there might be some instances where I'll have to go back in and kind of, as I described before, you just use a plastic edge and kind of scrape away any sort of paint from those from the clear plastic that I didn't want to be there. But it looks pretty good to me. A couple little areas, but I think by and large, great success. Yeah, there's a little spot there where the tape kind of went up on the top. So I'll just go back in with some paint and I can touch those areas up. There's something satisfying about peeling away the mask. I don't know what it is. Yeah, the interior detail on this thing is amazing. And if you look at last week's stream, I also show off the interior detail of the AA5, and there's even more stuff going on there. There's like running rails and extra weapons and all sorts of awesome stuff. All right, so there is our clear cockpit. There's a little bit of adhesive here on there that I can clean up. But by and large, did a pretty good job on the masking. I do see a couple of areas that I'll want to tidy up, but that looks pretty good. But the last little bit is that we need to attach this front window here to the surface. And as I kind of discussed last week, for this, because this windshield is made out of the same plastic as the rest of the miniature, you can use plastic glue. And I'm just going to lightly use some 400 grit sandpaper here. And I'm just going to sand down the interior of this to reveal a little bit of that bare plastic. And the reason that I'm not using super glue in this case is because it's really evident when your super glue fogs up on a clear part. And I would just want to avoid that as much as possible. So I'm just going to go about this by just scoring this down and then just using a little bit of old plastic glue to affix it to the front of the windshield. We're going to probably go like a minute or two late just so you all can see the finished product. Well, not quite finished, but like 90% finished. Okay. Let me grab some plastic glue. Okay. And I will just apply this kind of sparingly to the interior of this section. I like this plastic glue that's got a little brush applicator on it. Nice, precise way of applying all this stuff. Okay. Press it into place. Oh, that's a good idea. I haven't decided on what I want to do for the base yet. I'm thinking about doing something kind of vertical. Maybe even having like a, you know, like a rebel scout kind of like hiding in some underbrush underneath. That could be really cool. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see how this looks. Let's put this thing on here. It's got some little indentations to align everything. And the final version, I will snug it up and push it in there so it'll rest flat. But cool, you can see, I don't know how well you can see that via the camera, but you can see the pilots inside. You can see all that cool detail. Awesome. Yeah, it turned out great. So I think at this point, next stages are just kind of tidying up the washes a little bit. And then looking at it, I think that I want to pick out a few of these panels in a darker color. I was also entertaining the idea of doing a racing stripe along the side in gray, which I would just mask off with a couple strips of painter's tape and then use an airbrush and just paint it all in there. But that looks pretty good to me. I think that we achieved what we wanted to, which was showing how to work with the clear plastic parts and paint the interior details. So hopefully you gleaned some cool tips from this, or at least just got some insight into how this kit goes together and how you can best wrap it up. So the final stages for me would be to start to work on the base, which I kind of already started here. So I like to glue the stands down to the actual base itself. And then I just wrap it with some painter's tape here, which I kind of stopped halfway through the process, it looks like. And then I can build up this base with whatever sort of scenic details and stuff that I want to. I can spray it, and as long as I've kept this wrapped around the exterior, it will keep it nice and protected, much like we did for the windshield here. Alternatively, if you are nervous about that, you could always add the flight stand after you finish the entire base, but it's your choice. You can choose your own adventure. Okay, well, I think that is going to wrap up what we had planned for today, so I'm going to move back over to this other camera.